I bet every one of you knows the story of Donald Trump, a successful entrepreneur who decided to run for president as an outsider, and the rest is history.
Donald Trump will be the 40th
wins the presidency.
Has been elected president.
Has won the presidency.
5th president of the United States.
Proudly accept your nomination for president of the United States.
This type of path is an anomaly, especially in major Western countries. To get to such positions, you need to engage for your entire life in political activities. Trump, though, took an unconventional path, and it paid off. Now, I'm sure you think he was the first man to do something like that. But what if I tell you there was a very rich Italian man who did everything that Trump is doing right now, but 20 years before of him, basically giving him the blueprint to what his political career should have been like. And not only his career strategy was similar to Trump's, but even his personality. They both are controversial.
And I say, why is it we only take people from whole countries?
Siete ancora ed oggi come sempre dei poveri comunisti!
Funny.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Continuano a dire Berlusconi a casa, creandomi un certo disagio, perché disponendo di 20 case non saprei in quale andare.
And leaders.
And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night.
Non ho mai visto nessuno arrivare a dei buoni risultati partendo da una posizione di pessimismo. E allora smettetela una buona volta di fare i disfattisti.
Meet Silvio Berlusconi, one of the most important figures in Italy's recent history. And trust me, you're not ready for how similar he is to Donald Trump. He's quite literally the Italian version. Just like Donald Trump, if you ask to any Italian person, you realize they either love Berlusconi or hate him. There's no in between. And that's because throughout his life, Berlusconi had many controversial moments. For example, the alleged ties to the mafia in the early stage of his career as an entrepreneur. Berlusconi entered the business world at 25, specifically in the real estate industry. And I wonder who else did. At the time, he was working for Pietro Carali, who was into the real estate industry. Berlusconi hated working. He wanted to be the boss. That's why I started thinking and researching, and after days, he found a potential gold mine. He noticed that Mr. Canali was working as a contractor, building houses designed, financed, and sold by other companies. That model limited profits. By taking control of the entire process, from development to sales, Canali could have captured far greater returns. That's when Berlusconi decided it was time to change his life for good. He built an entire project for an house. He found the land where it could have been built, had a project for how it was supposed to be built, and had a loan from the bank ready. He just had to show all of this to Canali. And after a very tense meeting, Canali told Berlusconi that he liked the project. So Berlusconi asked him to start a company together. Canali agreed and told Berlusconi he could have gotten a mere 10% share on the company. Berlusconi's answer was a straight no. He wanted it to be 50-50, proving that he was hungry and confident in his abilities. This marked the start of his empire. Cash started flowing in his pockets like never before. He was building anything, even small cities. Yes, you heard it right. His project Milan 2 was a big residential neighborhood close to Mora. And this project was so successful that it made Berlusconi a millionaire. He was on an unstoppable rise, and as he mastered the real estate game, he started making connections with powerful people, such as Italy's Prime Minister at the time, Bettino Craxi. Around the same time, Donald Trump was starting to get involved into politics by donating to Reagan's campaign. Going back to Berlusconi, he realized he was ready to make another big move that later revealed to be a crucial pawn in his political strategy. Berlusconi realized that to promote his image, he needed a way to reach audiences on a large scale, and at the time there was no better way to do it than the television. That's when Berlusconi decided to buy a channel on Italy's TV and fight the government-owned channel Rai's monopoly. In the meantime, Berlusconi found another goldmine thanks to television, and that was by pioneering video advertisings on his channel, something that was only done in America. This vision was unlike anything seen before in Italy, and it worked. Matter of fact, the revenue of the company was growing by 48% every year, and it turned into a billion-dollar business that still goes on today. As his empire kept growing, he also managed to finally be allowed to broadcast across the entire country, thanks to a new law approved in 1990 by the government through the help of his friend Craxi. Now, Berlusconi was at the height of his fame, and he wasn't using only his TV channels, which by the way become more than just one across the years, to shape his image. He was also using something else, the love from football fans. In fact, Berlusconi bought football club AC Milan, saving it from bankrupt and turning into an unstoppable winning machine, marking the 90s as a golden era for the club. How could the fans not love their new president? At that point, Berlusconi was literally everywhere in Italy, in TV, on newspapers, on billboards, and even at your favorite sports games. You could just not escape him. And it was around that time that a corruption scandal occurred in Italy, involving all political parties, from left to right. Italy didn't have any politician that wasn't involved. The country was in total crisis, and a winner like Berlusconi during chaos could only see one thing: opportunity.
L'Italia è il paese che amo. Ho scelto di scendere in campo perché non voglio vivere in un paese illiberale governato da forze immature e da uomini legati a doppio filo a un passato politicamente ed economicamente fallimentare. Rinuncio dunque al mio ruolo di editore e di imprenditore per mettere la mia esperienza e tutto il mio impegno a disposizione di una battaglia in cui credo con assoluta convinzione e con la più grande fermezza.
This was the start of Berlusconi's political career, and his winning strategy was built on these three core pillars: positioning himself as an outsider entrepreneur ready to save the country after the mess that just happened, using all sorts of media at his disposal to promote his campaign, leveraging heavily on his personal brand. He was bold, arrogant, and an optimistic leader, exactly what Italy needed at the time. Now, when you look at his strategy, it isn't quite literally the same to Trump's 2016 run. Berlusconi won the elections and became Italy's prime minister at the height of his fame. But history has a way of humbling even those at the absolute peak of their power. Just a few months after being elected, Berlusconi had to resign. Italy was in shock. A former political ally accused him to have ties with the mafia. That's because in the late 70s, Berlusconi was receiving cash money in his bank account of a small local bank from Milan, which was then found to be a bank that the mafia used to launder money. On top of that, Berlusconi had mafia man Vittorio Mangani as a stable keeper for his sources in his own house. Mangano had been introduced to Berlusconi through Marcello Dell'Utri, one of Berlusconi's closest collaborators and later a key figure in his political party. At the time, Berlusconi claimed he was unaware of Mangano's criminal background, which only later emerged as deeply connected to the Sicilian mafia. Dell'Utri would eventually be convicted for mafia-related crimes, reinforcing suspicions about that early environment. These news were brutal, and everyone thought they would be assisting to the end of Berlusconi. he realized he needed to take a break and regroup. And he did so, while still continuing to consolidate his financial and mediatic power. And in 2001, he was ready to become the president again. He won the election, and now it was the perfect time to shine. Berlusconi adopted a very unconventional approach to his diplomatic strategy. He actually became friends with the other leaders. I'm sure you would have never thought to see Putin with such a big smile on his face. The two, in a very odd friendship duel, really liked each other, and this friendship proved to be important on the international scale too. In fact, George Bush and Vladimir Putin agreed to sign a deal in Rome in 2002 that guaranteed a long-lasting peace between NATO and Russia. This moment marked probably the highest point of the relationships between the West and Russia, and it was all thanks to Berlusconi's work for the most part and his bromance with Putin. In his second government, he brought a lot of political stability in Italy, as it was the longest government since the Second World War. But right after that, the end for him started. Despite the fact that he was once again elected for the fourth time as Italy's Prime Minister in 2008. Why? So many issues started to come up all together at once. Specifically, it was three of them mainly. The first one, the so-called ad personam laws. Those were laws that he specifically approved so that they could help himself or his friends by reducing the sentences on some financial crimes. The second one, a much bigger one, was what in Italy is called the Bunga Bunga scandal. Berlusconi was throwing parties in his house and apparently was in close contact with an underage girl. Berlusconi was never convicted, but the damage done on his image was irreparable. And finally, the third one, Merkel and Sarkozy plot against him. In fact, during that time, the world was undergoing a huge economic crisis. Greece had just declared bankrupt. Italy was struggling too. And Germany and France's leaders didn't particularly like Berlusconi. They didn't like his personality, they thought it wasn't serious, not formal and unpredictable. There's a very famous episode where during an official EU summit, Berlusconi kept Angela Merkel waiting while he finished the phone call. Merkel was visibly annoyed, interpreting the gesture as a lack of respect and seriousness. The episode became symbolic of how she perceived Berlusconi: informal, undisciplined, and unreliable, in moments that required institutional rigor. This clearly hurt Merkel's pride, and her and Sarkozy didn't even bother hiding it.
L'Italie est de plus en plus dans la ligne de mire, notamment des agences de notation.
Their plan was clear. They wanted to force Berlusconi to accept a loan from the International Monetary Fund, but that was basically saying that Italy was going bankrupt. It would have been humiliating, and it would have meant that markets would have lost trust in Italy. However, the pressure was too much, and Berlusconi ended up resigning from his position in 2011. He lost all his popularity and credibility among the Italian people. And it didn't end here. He eventually got convicted in 2013 for tax evasion. After these events, Berlusconi slightly removed himself from the public eye and never tried to get into such high positions ever again. He eventually died in 2023. So here's what I think about Silvio Berlusconi. You can argue about his politics, his scandals, or his ideas. But what you can't deny is this. After him, politics and Italy were never the same. He understood something before almost anyone else. Power doesn't come from ideology alone, but from attention, presence, and personality. Berlusconi redefined politics forever. And years later, when an American billionaire stepped onto the political stage using media, controversy, and a larger-than-life persona to win an election, It didn't come out of nowhere. The blueprint already existed. Love him or hate him, Silvio Berlusconi proved that an outsider could take over our country if he knew how to dominate the narrative. And he's certainly one of the most iconic men in Italy's recent history.